When we first begin preparing, it's important that we focus on the basics, the food and the water. But as you do this for a while, you can sort of start to individualize your preparedness plans. And that's what I want to talk about today. 11 supplies that I've gotten over the years that aren't the quote unquote must-have survival supplies, but they are the items that would be beneficial in a number of disaster or survival situations. And also, the supplies I'm going to be talking about today are pretty affordable, meaning they're not going to put a huge dent in your bank account, or you're not going to have to save up for a few months just to buy them. A lot of these are around $20, $25, and unlike some of the prepping gimmicks, these ones actually will make a good impact on your preparedness supplies, something that you would want to have around. Now, as far as the truly important preparedness supplies, at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about what some of those are and why they are so important. So make sure and stick around until the end. So with that, let's go ahead and get into some of these supplies that I've collected over the years, some of these that would be valuable in your preparedness plans. And as you're watching this, if you have any ideas or something that you have, make sure and leave those in the comments below. But the first one I have here is a mason jar oil lamp. And what this is basically is just the top of an oil lamp that you put on a mason jar. Just fasten it to any wide mouth mason jar, and they come in different sizes, but as long as it's a wide mouth mason jar, it's just fine. These are easy and convenient. You could get 3 or 4 of these, put it in a box and tuck it away. Most of us have mason jars lying around anyway, and you can also store a little bit more fuel in these than you would be able to in a normal lantern, depending on the size of the jar. And with these, you'd also need the wicks. You can get the long rolls of wicks and use, whatever size you want. And you should probably also get the flute that put over the top. And the reason why a flute is so important is because it burns a little bit brighter, and it helps not burn so much of the wick. So the wick lasts longer if you have that flute on there. But this little mason jar top, oil lamp top, is great because, yes, you can make your own DIY candles. I've made a few. You can use different oils, different alcohols. You can just pop a hole in top of one of these mason jar lids. You can use I've used a dollar store mop head. I've used some toilet paper tablets, a lot of different things you could do. But the cool thing about this is that you can adjust the wick. You can pull it up and pull it down, make it brighter or less bright. And speaking of the toilet paper tablets that I call them, or the compressed towels, that's next on my list. And these are fantastic because there's just so many uses for these. Not the main one that we think about, right? The toilet paper tablets, but sanitation. There are first aid uses, cleaning up around the house. These are reusable. We use these for camping all the time. Just great to have. And they come in different sizes, whether you're talking about the little small ones that are 9 inches or so, or you've got the large ones, the puck size ones that are basically a towel and are much stronger, much more absorbent, and will last a whole lot longer. So these are great to have, whether you just keep them in your car, keep them in your bug out bag, keep them around the house. I recently did a video where I went into detail about the different uses for these toilet paper tablets and how to use them. But they really are something that's just nice and convenient to have, whether you're talking about an emergency or disaster scenario or just working around the house and you don't want to dirty a towel. Next, I have the zip stitch wound closures, and there's a few different kinds of these. Some are more expensive than others. The one I have here is from Survivex. I bought on Amazon, and they're basically an alternative to stitches. Now, you also have steri strips, which are pretty good as well, and I suggest everyone have those in their first aid kits for those smaller cuts and reducing the scarring and things like that. Make sure you close that wound. Make sure that wound is sanitized and there's no bacteria in it before you close it up, or you're going to cause more problems. But the zip stitch is for something that are, maybe a little bit larger. You're out on the go. It's something that is going to stay on for a longer period of time and work a little bit better than a steri strip would. Now, this isn't something that I would use every time you get a cut because they are much more expensive than steri strips. But there could be situations where this would be that option if you're queasy about doing stitches, or you don't quite understand how to do stitches. Stitches get talked about all the time in the preparedness community. and this is a little less permanent than those stitches as well. Next on the list, something that I got a little while back, I've been using for quite some time now, is the Titan Survival Cord. This is a step above the typical 550 paracord that we hear about in preparedness all the time. The Survivor Cord is a vet-owned company, and they've tested it. It's mil spec. You've got the 6 different strands of the regular paracord material that would be in 550 paracord. But along with that, you have fishing line, which is 25-pound test, which is pretty strong fishing line. If you catch a 20-pound fish, you're probably doing pretty well. It's also got waxed infused jute, which can be used as a fire starter. And it's got a 30 gauge brass wire, which can be used for a number of different things, whether you're repairing things or you're building snare traps, whatever that might be. That would be pretty useful as well. 550 paracord is basically 550 pounds that it can hold. This Survivor cord goes up to 620 pounds. So it's some really cool stuff. And keep in mind, it's going to be a little bit more rigid than your normal paracord, the 550 paracord. So it's going to be harder to tie knots and things like that. But it's a lot more useful than just, your regular paracord. I wouldn't suggest having, 5 or 10 hanks of these. One of these that is 100 feet is going to do you just fine because you won't use it as much as you would paracord or other cordage. But this Titan Survivor Cord makes a great gift, and it's just something cool to have and useful to have in your preparedness supplies. Next, I have a micro bug out bag, or is what I call it, or a pocket-sized backpack. Basically, this stuffs into a small bag that you can either leave in your trunk, put in your regular bug out bag. For us, when the children lived here, we put these in the trunks, and we had a box of different preparedness supplies, whether you're talking about the ration bars, first aid kits, things like that. They didn't necessarily want a bug out bag in their car, but what this was good for was if they did need to, their car broke down and they needed to hoof it somewhere, they could throw all of that stuff in this little bag and be good to go. This could also be useful if you're in a get home situation. You've got a friend or a coworker in your car with you that doesn't have a bug out bag. You can offload some of your gear to them, or even add a little bit that you already have in your car into that backpack, and they could carry some stuff as well. They're about $15, $16 depending on where you get them, and are really useful to have. You just never know when you're going to need an extra bag, and instead of, having to use a shopping bag, a grocery bag, or something like that, you have this little small backpack with you. It's going to be a lot more easy and convenient than, wrapping some stuff up in a bandana or something like that. The next one I have is a credit card knife, and I'm pretty hesitant when it comes to all the gimmicky, gadgety things in preparedness, and there's a whole lot of them. But this is actually a pretty neat idea and pretty convenient because it's basically the size of a credit card that you can put in your wallet, and it'll be there in an emergency. Now, these aren't the strongest knives in the world. I think I would say they're probably, 10 uses max, and then they're going to be worthless or they're going to break. Also, don't forget that you have them in your wallet if you do have these, because if you go through airport security or somewhere, they're going to find it and you're going to have to throw it away. Now, I was looking on Amazon for these, and for some reason, they don't sell them on Amazon anymore. I'm not quite sure why. They sell all sorts of other knives, but for some reason they don't sell these. But you can find these at other stores and other places online. But the credit card knives are pretty cool because of how easy they are to just stash in your wallet. And in an emergency, when you don't have anything on you, you probably have your wallet or your purse, and you'll be able to grab that and use that in emergency for simple tasks like cutting cord or getting wood shavings, anything that you would need a knife for. The next one I have that I've been using for years they're called AlokSak bags, and these are waterproof bags. There are a number of different options for this, but I really like these because of their thickness. You've got regular baggies that will be sort of watertight, but the material on those is really thin, and the seals may not seal properly, or the edges of the bag might pop open and you get things wet inside. These are really strong and really durable. I use these. I've got a first aid kit in my bug out bag that I use one of these for. You could put cell phones in them, anything that you want to make sure if you are in a bug out or get home situation, you don't want to get wet, or even camping. You don't want to get wet, you can use one of these and feel confident that it's going to actually do the job that you expect it to do. You can completely submerge these underwater and they're going to be just fine. I had my cell phone underwater in one of these bags for 5 minutes and it still works absolutely fine. So these bags are really nice. They are a little bit more expensive than some of the other options and less expensive than some of the other options as well. But they really do the job, and there are different sizes depending on what your needs are, and you can get a few, put together a first aid kit like I did, or use it for other things. The next one my wife Lisa brought to my attention a while back. She's an RN, and that is a nursing drug guidebook. The Lippincotts Nursing Drug Guidebook is the one that she has, and these are fantastic because it gives you all the information that you might need to know on different medications, whether you're talking about antibiotics, pain relievers. It tells you the dosages, the side effects, all the information that you might need to know. Now with these, the newer ones are like $50, $60, but you don't really need a newer one. You can get on eBay and get a 2013, heck 2009, even older than that. And the reason you don't need a newer model is because drugs don't change much. What antibiotics do is the same now as it was 20, 30 years ago. So there may be some newer drugs in there, but for the most part, anything that we're going to need in a situation where doctors or hospitals might not be available is going to be in one of these older books. So these are just something great to have to put in your preparedness library because you never know what situation you're going to be in where you might need to use these. If you do have antibiotics, it's important that we know the right antibiotics for what we're trying to treat. Otherwise, we're going to do more damage than good, or it might do nothing at all. So having one of these nurse drug guidebooks is fantastic to put in your preparedness library because it could be that critical information you need. Next, I have survival bandanas, is what I call them. There are a bunch of different kinds of these. And the reason I like these is because you just never know what you're going to need and if you've forgotten that information or not when a situation happens. So whether you're talking about wilderness skills, how to build a lean-to shelter, how to tie knots, basic things like that. If you have one of these bandanas that have those instructions on it, not only do you have the normal bandana use, but you've also got this as a little bit of a guide. I've got a couple, one that has first aid procedures on it, whether that's tying a splint to somebody, what to do in different situations. I've got an orange one that has information about navigation, fire starting, shelter, water collection and purification, a number of different things. But these are one of those items that you might as well have something that's going to be useful. You should probably already have a bandana or a schmog in your bug out bag, your car, or probably have a few of them lying around. So it doesn't hurt to have some that have this information on this. You're in a survival situation. You're not trying to win a beauty contest or anything, but having this information could be really beneficial in a life-saving situation where you may have forgotten how to do different things, or normal situations. I forget how to tie knots. Every time I go fishing, I have to remind myself how to tie knots. In a situation like that, one of these would become really useful. Another one that I think that I've had for a while that's really useful is from Wazoo Gear, and that's their cache belt. I like Wazoo. They don't have a huge inventory of supplies, but a lot of their stuff is pretty unique, and they are American company, American made, and have a few really cool different things. They've got a cache hat and also the cache belt. I've used this belt for years. It's really easy to buckle. You can adjust it, depending on your weight throughout the years. Really easy to just move that buckle and adjust it. You can put a number of different things inside this belt, whether you're talking about just having some cash hidden, a couple $20 bills or so. You've got fishing kits, anything that's thin enough that's not going to affect you, you can put in here. Notes and important contact information, things like that you don't want people to find if you're in a survival situation, or maybe you're getting robbed or something like that. Criminals won't necessarily ask for your belt or to look in your belt. They'll want jewelry, they'll want your wallet and things like that. But if you have things tucked away inside of one of these cash belts, it could be very useful. Same thing with the hats. Like I said, Wazoo's got a few different things on their website that are, a little bit different than what you would normally see in some of on Amazon or some of these other preparedness websites. But I really do like this cash belt right here. Next, I have a couple fire starters, and I know there's 100 different ways to get a fire started and a lot of DIY ways, at home, Vaseline and cotton balls, things like that. But I've tested out quite a few of these different fire starters, and the two that I've landed on are the Firelight and the Fire Flame. My favorite is the Firelight for a few different reasons. They are an American-owned company. In preparedness, you may have even seen these folks at different preparedness conventions. This is a small business, American-made, veteran-owned, just a really cool business and a really cool fire starter as well. This is basically wood shavings infused with wax, and it starts really quickly. 1 or 2 strikes of your ferro rod, and it's going to get this lit. You can get this wet and it will still light. So if you're in not so ideal conditions, it's still going to work. If the wood's wet, you may need to use a little bit more, but it's going to get the job done. This is something I do keep in my bug out bag now, and something that I use. It's my go-to basically when it comes to fire starting material. The other one that I have that I use quite a bit, and this is for starting fires at home or, in my bug out bag, is the Fire Flame. And this is basically little packets of paraffin wax and whatever else they put in there. It does give off a little bit that waxy type smell, but it's not gasoline or anything like that. The one benefit this has over a lot of the other different fire starters is it does last a long time. If you light the packet on the outside on fire, it lasts probably 7-8 minutes until that goes out. If you are using a ferro rod, you would need to break open the bag and put a striker to it and use it that way. But it does last a really long time. So these two fire starters are my go-to when it comes to what I carry in my bug out bag or what I'm going to use if I need to get a fire lit. Whether we're talking about a bug out situation or we're talking about around the home, these work really well. So that's the 11 items that I have on my list that I came up with here today. I know there are a lot more things in preparedness as we begin to customize everything, our individual plans that we use. If you have any ideas or things that other people might like, make sure and leave those in the comments below. There's a lot of different things in preparedness. Some are gadgety and some are not, that could be useful. And these 11 that I talked about today, while some are maybe a little bit gadgety, they are useful in a number of different situations. I did mention in the beginning about preparedness supplies that are truly essential. And that is the most important part to take care of before you even think about any of these supplies that we talked about today, or any of these supplies that are designed to make the job a little bit easier. Make sure you're taking care of those important things first, and then you can focus on these. I recently did a video about the most important, the 15 critical supplies that I think are the most important and are the bare minimum that we should have in a disaster or survival situation. You can watch that video here. And until next time, take care and prepare, everyone. We will talk to you all later.